Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's cracking, Fantasy Champs? My name is Morgan Colby. Rick's not with me today. He will be back, and we will be back with 3 episodes later this week. It's a little bit too much excitement there, but we will be back, like I said, together for the next 3 episodes. It's going to be, starts, sits, and then trade targets. No particular order for those, but we will bring that content to you. Today, I'm going to bring you waiver wire ads for week 5. So these are guys that you want to try to get picked up either at the waiver wire deadline tonight or tomorrow if they clear. So just keep an eye out for your waiver wires. Make sure you get these submitted tonight. But we're going to go through each position like we normally do, using the sleeper trending tab, and go through guys that we'll pick up, guys maybe that you shouldn't pick up, stuff like that. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Hopefully you won your matchup. I won this week, getting the 2-2 in the home league. I also won in a bunch of other leagues, but I was able to pull off a big win in the home league here to get to 2-2. Not a great record. Don't love it, but we're here. But anyway, yeah. So without further ado, let's get to the waiver wire section of the podcast. Before we do, follow us on all Twitter, on all social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can also follow me, Morgan Colby _FF on Twitter. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please do these 2 things: leave a review, and then take this podcast, hit share, send it to your friends. If you are watching on YouTube, I thank you for coming in and watching on YouTube. I appreciate it very much so. Please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications, and then go down below, leave a comment. We'll try our best to get to those comments. I got to turn notifications on my phone because for whatever reason, I didn't get any notifications from the Sit Show where you guys asked a ton of questions. So I'm sorry about that. But we will answer your questions as best we can as they come in. So make sure you leave those in the comments. Now, without further ado, let's get to the waiver wire section of the show. Really excited to talk about some waiver wire ads because I finally feel like we have some guys to talk about this week, like early in the season so far. I feel like I haven't had any people to actually get to or talk about in fantasy football. So excited to talk about the guys that we have here today. But let's get started. Let's get started. Let's do this thing. We'll start with the running back position. So there is a couple of guys here that have been added a lot in on the Sleeper app. The first one being Trey Sermon from the Indianapolis Colts. And Trey Sermon, only reason why he's a massive waiver wire ad this week is specifically because Jonathan Taylor went down with an injury this past week. They're not considering putting him on injured reserve, but there is a very good chance that he will likely not play in week 5 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll kind of have a better idea later this week if he's going to play. So everyone's kind of been running to the waiver wire and picking up Trey Sermon. While I don't think it's a bad ad for the week, especially if, bye week start this week in week 5, especially if you need a start at the running back position. I wouldn't dump a ton of waiver budget on him, only specifically because I actually don't think Trey Sermon's going to have long-term value, obviously with Jonathan Taylor coming back. So, I mean, if Taylor wasn't coming back, you could run to the waiver wire, add Trey Sermon, and get him on your team, but he hasn't even really showed that much efficiency when he's caught an opportunity, which is not much on the season so far, so you can't really tell from the small sample size, but to me at this point, because Jonathan Taylor doesn't look like he's going on IR and it doesn't look like his injury is super significant, Sermon should be a guy that you go after as a plug and play this week. But outside of that, I wouldn't add too much waiver budget. Maybe 1 to 5% of your waiver budget if you really want to go add him. So that would be 1 to 5 waiver budget for $100 for if you have $100 waiver budget, and then 2 to 10 if you have 200. So that's what I would do with Trey Sermon. Not excited about him. There's not much long-term stuff. The guy I am kind of excited about is Kareem Hunt. And Kareem Hunt, sorry, I'm drinking my water. If you're listening on the podcast, you're wondering what the pauses are on podcasting platforms. The second one is, like I said, Kareem Hunt. And Hunt from Kansas City, very interesting. And I was kind of mad because in the home league, I picked him up as soon as he got signed. And obviously, he didn't really have any opportunity to play that week. They wanted to get him up to speed, eventually signing him to the actual full-time roster this week. But I ended up dropping him before these games started this week for another player. And boy, do I regret that, because now I have to go to the waiver wire and spend massive amounts of waiver budget on Kareem Hunt, which is very disappointing. But he had a really good week this week. He only played 45% of the snaps, but he out-touched Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. He had 14 rushing attempts for 69 yards, very efficient on the ground, and then 2 catches for 16 yards. So basically 16 total touches in the game for like around 80 yards. And good performance for him in fantasy football. Only 10 fantasy points in PPR, which not great. But it shows you something right now that is really interesting, and it's that early Kareem Hunt has now taken over the Chiefs' backfield and just walked into the room and started being that guy. We see another running back of the same age, 29 years old, Alvin Kamara, that a lot of people thought maybe might be too old, performing well right now. So if Hunt comes in fully rested in a system that he already knows and understands with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he starts getting full-time work, he's definitely going to be valuable for fantasy football. And like I said, this week it was a complete takeover in that backfield with Kareem Hunt. It was clear they wanted him to be involved. I tend to be more excited about Kareem Hunt than I probably should be, if we're being completely honest. Hunt is, like, you just see flashbacks of him in the Chiefs uniform. He's not wearing the same number, but he is, however, looking very much the same as maybe not the same, maybe a little bit older, but he looks, like back in the day when Kareem Hunt was on the Chiefs and he was going off and he was that top 12 running back every single season that you had. So, that kind of gets me a little bit excited if that does happen. There are a couple of caveats here. One is, I don't know at age 29 if Kareem Hunt can hold the full workload with the Chiefs for a long stretch of time. And I think he probably will be a little bit more inconsistent on a week-to-week basis. I like him as a plug-and-play, and I like him as a potential, like, if you add him on your team and then he turns into what he was back in the day, at least 75 to 85% of that player, then you're going to get the waiver wire ad of the year in Kareem Hunt. So that's like last year when people added Jerome Ford. Boring ad, but turned out well for most of the people that added him. I think Kareem Hunt's kind of in that same bucket where it's like kind of a little bit of a boring ad in that you don't really anticipate or expect too much. But because the starting running back is going to be out for an extended amount of time, Hunt is the guy that now takes over the backfield, and at least it looks like that this week, and produces the most fantasy points out of that backfield for the time being, at least. Like I said, I need to temper the expectations. But number two is, at some point down the line, you are going to have what's his name? The backup the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know why I can't remember his friggin' name. I'm a failure. But when he gets back, he is going to be the main starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs at this point. So Isaiah Pacheco, there it is. My brain just completely blanked on that. But Pacheco is going to be the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs when he gets back. So that is automatically going to crush anything that Kareem Hunt is doing for fantasy football. So when adding him, he is he's really just a short-term fix for your fantasy team rather than a long-term play in hopes that he's really good. And just to give you an update about Pacheco, there were no complications with his surgery. He had a successful surgery. He's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. So that gives you enough time with Kareem Hunt here to kind of mix him in, because he still has, like, I want to say probably 6 weeks left in his recovery. But so I would try at least my hardest to get Kareem Hunt on your team. My objective probably would be to add 30 to 40% of your waiver budget on Kareem Hunt, just to make sure you get him in case something does go awry with Isaiah Pacheco, because if Kareem Hunt does end up being the starting running back for this team for the remainder of the season, obviously that would be really good for you. And if Pacheco is continually hurt, then you can go from there. So get Kareem Hunt on your team, whatever it takes. Rostered in only 40% of leagues. Another guy being added a lot is Justice Hill. I don't know if I love this one that much. He only had 35% of the snaps, but he did catch 6 passes this week and 1 touchdown. So 6 passes, 78 yards, 1 touchdown. Had some efficient upside there for the Ravens. What I've noticed about the Ravens is that there's a lot of inconsistencies everywhere on the field. So in my mind, Hill has probably got to be relegated off into the corner. In this 21 fantasy point week is just a flash in the pan in my mind. So I wouldn't try to run out and do everything I can to get Justice Hill. But he's not a bad ad. I would go between 5 and 10% of my waiver budget to grab Justice Hill. Like I said, not high expectations for him, specifically because his snap percentages were only at 35% and 40% the last 2 weeks. And the only reason why there was a big fantasy point outing for Justice Hill is because he got targeted 6 times, caught 6 passes for 78 yards. So a lot of options in this offense to throw the ball to between Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, among others. And Justice Hill probably won't consistently get that target share. He has had above 6 targets in 2 games this year, which has been good for him, but it's not something that'll be consistent. So should he be rostered? Absolutely. Should it be for a lot of waiver budget? No. And should he be started? Probably not. Tank Bigsby has been getting added in a lot of leagues. I see this guy as a high-quality handcuff for your fantasy team if you have Travis Etienne. Tank Bigsby is, he's all right. He only had 29% of the snaps, but he had 7 carries for 90 yards this past week, so he kind of came onto the scene and was hyper-efficient with his opportunity. So I don't think he's going to get more work going into future weeks. But if ETN were to miss any time, Bigsby would be the waiver wire ad of the week. So if you have a spot on your roster for him, you can go add him. I think he's going to be free, so I wouldn't add any waiver budget on him. If you want to make sure you get him, maybe like 1 to 5 waiver budget, regardless of the league you're in. You might be able to snag him if somebody else tries to get him for free. So Bigsby, not a bad ad, but it's definitely only a handcuff ad. He doesn't have standalone fantasy value. Another guy that's interesting is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's set to return to practice, okay? So I don't know if he's going to return this week, but this is another guy that kind of muddies the Kareem Hunt waters, which is why, like I said, I need to temper my excitement for Kareem Hunt, because I think Clyde will come in and probably be the main running back for Kansas City instead of Kareem Hunt. But he's still on the PUP. He's going to return to practice. It is anticipated that he probably won't return this week, but we'll see. If he returns, he returns. If he's ready to play again. Lot of stuff going on in that Kansas City Chiefs backfield. This is probably a smarter, deeper ad over Kareem Hunt, because a lot of people are going to run and get Kareem Hunt, and you can go get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Don't love it, but he's going to be totally free. I wouldn't even add waiver budget on him. I think this is a big-brained fantasy football ad. Like, if you're trying to have a big brain, go out and get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Outside of that, I don't see anyone else at the running back position I would add as of this point. I would scour looking for PUP guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire to add, and if you add him onto your team, throw him in your IR slot and just hold there for a little while. Let's go to the wide receiver position. Talk about Dontavion Wicks. who this week finally had a huge game. 13 targets, 5 catches, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. He is, I talked about this in the offseason, the week leading up to the main draft week of the year. And I tweeted out that the two best receivers on the Packers were Jaden Reed and Dontavion Wicks. I believe Christian Watson went down at some point in this game, opening up the way for Dontavion Wicks to have a good game. But I was drafting him in a lot of my leagues in the last round, second to last round, because I thought this guy has upside, really great route runner, good receiver. If he gets opportunity at some point, he could step up and be a really good receiver. Now, he was inefficient with those 13 targets, but still caught 5 passes where he was efficient for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. So 24 fantasy points, nothing to scoff at. I don't know if it continues. Like, if Christian Watson is going to miss time, then Wicks looks to be like a really, really, really good wide receiver to add this week. I would add 25 to 30% of my waiver budget to get him just because I believe in his upside. And, Christian Watson is always injured. So it's not a bad idea to get Wicks. Now, like I said, I would wait. I want to make sure I have him in case he starts to break out as the season goes along, especially because Jordan Love is back. So as the season goes along, if Dontavion Wicks starts to break out, you want to make sure you have him on your team. I don't think he's a start-worthy guy this week unless we confirm that Christian Watson is out. Then maybe we can be like, okay, let's start him against the Rams. But Dontavion Wicks, get him on your team. Love this guy. Josh Downs. Oh, my God. This is another late-round pick that I was adding. And finally, it came on. He was hurt for the first 2 weeks of the year. Last week he started. He played 5. He got 5 targets, 3 catches, 22 yards. So not good for Josh Downs. Finally comes in, has 9 targets, 8 catches, 82 yards, touchdown, 22 fantasy points against Pittsburgh. This kid could be good. He plays a very specific role that was exploited last year in the short time that Anthony Richardson was on the field with Josh Downs. And he was fantastic in his opportunities on Sunday. So, to me, getting Josh Downs on your team as well, if he's available, is worth it because he was only rostered in 29% of leagues prior to this Sunday. So, like I said, I would go out and I'd use the similar amount as Dontavion Wicks, 25 to 30% of your waiver budget to kind of get Josh Downs on your team. I don't know. His volume did uptick when Anthony Richardson went down and Joe Flacco came into the game. So if that continues to be the case, then maybe Josh Downs does get more consistent fantasy production. But we'll see what happens. I think with Josh Downs playing as well as he did, they'll probably give him more looks. It's not going to be consistent on a week-to-week basis. So similar with Wicks, I want to wait and see with this guy. But if you add him, stick him at the bottom of your bench, wait and see. It could be possible. I always like to use these guys as trade targets as well. Or trade pieces as well to throw into a trade and be like, oh, this guy did good this week, yada, yada, yada. So love Josh Downs. Try to get him on your team. Trey Tucker, let your league mates pick him up. I don't want nothing to do with him. There is rumors floating around that Devontae Adams demanded a trade. So if that does happen, okay, if he does get traded, Trey Tucker is a fantastic add. So I maybe would speculatively add him on my roster because he's already getting kind of a decent target share over the last 2 weeks, and his snap percentages have been kind of high, and he had 22 and 15 fantasy points the last 2 weeks in fantasy football, so that's good for Trey Tucker. I kind of think he's like if Adams is there, it's just kind of a flash in the pan, and he's the third receiver on a bad football team, and I don't want that. But if Adams walks out the door, that could open things up for Trey Tucker to get some more opportunity and more production. And if that is the case, you could have a decent wide receiver here that you can stick on the bottom of your bench. I would use 5 to 10% of my waiver budget on Trey Tucker and call it a day. But like I said, similar to the first 3 guys, that's the case. If you miss out on him, I don't think it's the end of the world because I think this could easily be a guy that you're talking about dropping next week. So yes, that's Trey Tucker. Tutu Atwell had a decent week this week. He's actually had 2 decent weeks in a row, 13 and 12 fantasy points. This is a little bit deeper of an ad, but if you want to go out and get him, I wouldn't chagrin it, especially with some of the injuries that have happened in the wide receiver room for the Rams. So Tutu Atwell, not a bad ad. If you want to put waiver budget, the max I'd go is 5%. I don't want to put that much on him. I'm not really hyper interested in him, and if you miss out on him to your league mate, then that's fine too. They can waste the roster spot on Tutu Atwell. And then Jordan Whittington, probably the only other guy that I would take a look at from the Rams. We talked about him potentially being, a Puka Nacua replacement if he were to get hurt. He had 6 catches on 8 targets this past Sunday, so there was an uptick. Because he's a rookie, I do like him better than Tutu Atwell. Like, we know what Tutu Atwell is at this point, so Jordan Whittington could be a guy that, as a rookie, comes onto the scene, starts to have a little bit more success. Kind of like him, but I don't expect much. He's free, though. He's probably going to be free. Outside of that, I don't have a lot of receivers that I want to discuss or talk about, so those guys are interesting. Oh, another one. Justin Watson, not a great player. Don't expect a lot of upside. I'd let your league mates grab him, but if you really need it, if you have a deep bench and you really need another guy this week to add Justin Watson, not a bad one, but I'd let your other league, if you have a shorter bench, let your other league mates grab him. Okay, there are your running backs, there are your wide receivers. Let's talk about one quarterback that I would stream this week. And depending on the circumstance, depending on the situation, and knowing what we get out of this guy over the last 6 to 7 starts that he has had, I would think about adding Joe Flacco against Jacksonville. I'd think about it, but we don't know if Richardson is going to miss any additional time. And recent reports suggest that he is unlikely to miss time. So that's good news for the Colts. Well, at least for their star quarterback. Star quarterback is strong. For their rookie young quarterback. So if it's not Joe Flacco and he can't play this week, it would definitely be Justin Fields from Pittsburgh. He dropped 32 fantasy points. He's going to play Dallas this week. Love that play for him. I'm playing him this week. Dallas is going to be a tougher matchup, but I think what we've seen Justin Fields do early in the seasons in his best fantasy years has been start slow and then compile really big games. He had 32 points this week, 20 points the week before, so I think Justin Fields is a guy that you got to get on your team. I don't know if it's going to cost any waiver budget, but if you have bye weeks this week, Justin Fields is the dude that I'm going to go with as an ad this week. He's only rostered in 43% of leagues. And then the tight end ad of the week here. It's gross out here, y'all. It's disgusting. We are in the struggle bus sphere of the season for tight ends. I'll tell you right now, I have Mark Andrews. Don't know what to do with him. Should you drop him? I don't know. I would say if you have Mark Andrews, hold him. Hold him for the time being and see where it goes. But for tight ends, man, there's nothing here. Taysom Hill had a weird week in fantasy football. No receiving, but he came in and he rushed it a couple of times for a touchdown. I think it was 2 touchdowns. And he was like their bona fide running back. I don't know. So he's an interesting ad. Like if they continue to run out and use him, I don't see anyone else on this list that is like addable at this point besides maybe Tucker Kraft, who had 17 points this week and 9 targets. You know, there could be something there with Tucker Kraft where, you know, he's ranked as the tight end 11 on the year, so what the hell? But I would maybe think about adding Tucker Kraft. I don't know if it's going to cost you waiver budget, but I'd speculatively add him. And Cade Otton the last 2 weeks, too, if you want to take a look at him, he had 8 targets and 9 targets in the last 2 weeks. 9 and 11 fantasy points for the Bucs. So maybe there's something there finally coming onto the scene in Tampa Bay. You know, just keep an eye out on Cade Otton, but if you want to add him as a deeper tight end ad, that's fine as well. How much time do I have left? 20 minutes? 24 minutes. Yeah, some hot button names that I see here that are trending down that people are dropping. Definitely been Mark Andrews. I don't know. I don't know what to do with Mark Andrews. For now, what I would say for fantasy football, because I just ranted about him 2 seconds ago, I would hold him, but I don't know that I would play him. I would find another solution at the tight end position. Whether, guys we just talked about, Tucker Kraft, Cade Otton, Taysom Hill maybe as a deeper option if you don't really have any tight ends available. Like, those guys are the guys that I would kind of maybe run after, try to play this week and wait it out on Mark Andrews and see what happens. But if he keeps producing poorly, I don't really want him for fantasy football. So that's tough for Mark Andrews. Other people that are being dropped that I see, Keon Coleman's been dropped a lot. I'd wait on that. I don't love Keon Coleman, but I'd wait on that. People out here dropping Rashee Rice without all the information. He's out for week 5, but they got some good information on him, I guess. So it didn't sound like he tore his ACL, but keep an eye on that. But yeah, Kyle Pitts has been another mention of people that have been dropping him. He's still rostered in 96% of leagues, but large swaths are saying drop him. 11, 5, 7, and 0 the last 4 weeks. So disappointing seeing Kyle Pitts, but I think the Falcons offense starting to come together. He should be fine as well. He's got more fantasy points than Mark Andrews, I'll tell you that much. But anyway, if you have any questions about any waiver wire ads for this week, please leave them in the comments below. We really appreciate the comments. We appreciate the likes, subscribes, all that stuff on YouTube. Please leave a review, do all that stuff. We'll be back later this week with starts, sits, and trade targets. Sayonara.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.